How a Tea Party Started a Revolution. The Birth of America. December 16, 1773. Picture this. It's a freezing night in Boston. The harbor is quiet, but the city is tense. Suddenly shadows emerge from the alleys. Men dressed as Mohawk Indians, their faces hidden, their hearts pounding. They climb aboard British ships, smash open heavy wooden chests, and hurl them into the dark water below. One chest, then another, and another, until more than 300 are gone, spilling nearly 90,000 pounds of tea into the sea. To the British Empire, this was vandalism. To the colonists, it was defiance. And to history, it was the night America began its long road to revolution. Pause, shift to inviting tone. But to really understand why tea could ignite such fury, we have to rewind. Because this story isn't just about a beverage. It's about freedom, power, and the birth of an identity that still defines America today. Seeds of discontent. In the mid-1700s, the 13 colonies weren't backwaters. They were vibrant, growing communities with over 2 million people. Farmers, merchants, artisans, people building new lives in a land full of opportunity. But across the ocean, Britain saw them mostly as a source of profit. The colonies provided raw materials, tobacco, cotton, lumber, and in return, they bought British goods. It was a system designed to benefit the mother country. Then came the French and Indian War, part of the global 7 Years' War. Britain fought hard to drive France out of North America. They won, but victory came at a massive price. The war had doubled Britain's national debt, and someone had to pay for it. Parliament decided it should be the colonies. After all, they'd benefited from Britain's protection, right? But to the colonists, the sudden taxes felt like betrayal. They had no seats in Parliament, no voice in the decisions that ruled their lives. And that's when a phrase began to echo from town to town. No taxation without representation. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a demand for respect, and it would become the heartbeat of the American Revolution. The first clashes. The first major test came with the Stamp Act of 1765. Suddenly, every newspaper, legal document, even playing cards had to carry an official stamp. Paid for, of course, with tax money. Imagine you're a small-town printer in Boston or Philadelphia. Your livelihood depends on selling newspapers. And now, every copy costs more because of a law passed thousands of miles away by people you didn't elect. Wouldn't you be furious? The outrage was immediate. Crowds filled the streets. Effigies of tax collectors were hanged and burned. Merchants boycotted British goods. And underground groups like the Sons of Liberty began to organize. Men like Samuel Adams, who used fiery speeches and clever propaganda to rally the people. Britain, surprised by the resistance, repealed the Stamp Act a year later. But the damage was done. The colonies had tasted the power of protest, and they weren't about to forget it. Still, Parliament didn't give up. Next came the Townshend Acts in 1767, taxing imported goods like glass, paper, paint, and tea. Once again, colonists boycotted. Once again, anger grew. Blood in the streets. Boston quickly became the heart of resistance. The city was full of printers, dockworkers, and merchants, people who felt the sting of taxes every day. To keep order, Britain stationed soldiers there. But soldiers and civilians living side by side, it was a recipe for disaster. On March 5, 1770, a crowd gathered near the customs house. They shouted insults at the red-coated soldiers, threw snowballs and stones, tension spiked, and then chaos. Shots rang out. When the smoke cleared, 5 colonists lay dead. It became known as the Boston Massacre. Patriot leaders wasted no time. Paul Revere created an engraving that made it look like soldiers had fired deliberately into an innocent crowd. Whether or not that was true didn't matter. The image spread everywhere. To the colonists, the British weren't just greedy. They were killers. The Tea Act and a harbor transformed. By 1773, Britain tried a new tactic. The East India Company, one of the most powerful corporations in the world, was drowning in unsold tea. Parliament passed the Tea Act, giving the company the right to sell directly to the colonies at a lower price, but with tax still attached. To the British, this seemed like a win-win. Cheaper tea for the colonists, profit for the company. But to American merchants, it was a disaster. They were being cut out of the trade. To patriots, it was proof Britain could force them to accept taxes, whether they liked it or not. And that's when Boston decided to make history. On the night of December 16th, about 100 men disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians. Their goal wasn't to trick anyone. The disguises were symbolic, a statement of American identity. They boarded 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and spent hours smashing open chests and dumping them into the harbor. In total, 342 chests, worth about $1.7 million in today's money, sank beneath the waves. The salty water of Boston Harbor turned dark with tea, and the message was clear: we will not be ruled like subjects. We will be free. Britain strikes back. To the British government, this wasn't protest. It was destruction of property, a direct challenge to imperial authority. The response was harsh. In 1774, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, known in America as the Intolerable Acts. Boston's port was closed until the tea was paid for. Town meetings were restricted. The governor, appointed by Britain, gained sweeping new powers. And British soldiers could even be housed in private homes. Instead of intimidating the colonies, these laws united them. For the first time, representatives from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress. Men who had never met before, farmers, lawyers, merchants, sat together and debated their future. They agreed to boycott British goods, to support Boston, and to prepare for the possibility of war. The idea of independence was still radical. Most colonists still considered themselves loyal subjects of the king. But the line between loyalty and rebellion was getting thinner every day. The first shots of revolution. The breaking point came in April 1775. British General Thomas Gage ordered his troops to march to Concord, Massachusetts, to seize colonial weapons. But thanks to writers like Paul Revere, the militias were warned. At Lexington, a small band of colonists, farmers, shopkeepers, ordinary men, stood in the path of hundreds of redcoats. No one knows who fired the first shot. But when the smoke cleared, 8 colonists lay dead. The British marched on to Concord, where they met even fiercer resistance. By the end of the day, nearly 300 British soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured. It was the beginning of open war. Emerson would later call that first musket blast the shot heard round the world. Because it didn't just start a battle, it started a revolution that would inspire nations across the globe. So why does the Boston Tea Party matter? Because it wasn't about the tea. It was about power, dignity, and self-determination. It was about ordinary people saying, we deserve a voice. We will not be treated as subjects. We will be free. The revolution that followed would cost lives, divide families, and pit farmers with muskets against the most powerful empire on earth. But out of that struggle came something new, the United States of America. And it all began with a few hundred chests of tea sinking into Boston Harbor. In our next episode, we'll explore America's bloodiest conflict. Not a war against Britain, but a war against itself. Where brother fought brother, slavery stood against freedom, and the very survival of the Union hung in the balance, the Civil War.